Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into the science of learning. We're going to break down the real principles that explain why some learning methods actually work and why others just leave you feeling totally stuck.
So let's just jump right in with a question I know we've all asked ourselves at some point. You're putting in the time, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but you're just not getting anywhere. Why does it sometimes feel like you're just spinning your wheels? Well, it turns out the answer usually isn't about finding some new magic trick or some secret study hack. It's about getting a handle on the foundational principles that make any technique work in the first place. Once you get these, you can make almost any method work for you. To do that, we need to build from the ground up on what we can call the 4 pillars of learning. Just think of these as the absolute bedrock, the core ideas that support any kind of real, lasting progress. Our very first pillar is motivation. But, this isn't just about feeling excited or passionate. Scientifically speaking, it's more like a calculated belief. It's your brain doing a super fast check. Is this thing actually useful? Can I really do it? And is the payoff going to be worth the effort? And you can break that calculation down into 3 key parts. First, valence. How much do you really value the goal? Then you've got expectancy. Do you genuinely believe you have what it takes? And finally, instrumentality. Do you actually trust that doing the work will get you the reward? If even one of those is shaky, your motivation just falls apart. Okay, our second pillar is a really cool concept called interlanguage. The best way to think about it is like a personal, living, breathing mental map of the skill you're learning. It's not about being good or bad. It's a snapshot of the unique rulebook you've built inside your head so far, somewhere on that path from knowing nothing to being a total pro. And this is why it's so important. Understanding someone's inner language, or your own, is everything. It tells you exactly what to work on next. It helps you figure out which mistakes are okay for now and which ones need to be fixed. And most importantly, it's how you set a challenge that's perfectly dialed in to where you are right now. Pillar number 3 is active construction. This idea completely flips the old model of learning on its head. It says our brains don't just soak up information like a sponge. No way. Instead, we're more like little scientists, constantly building theories, testing them out, and then tweaking those theories as we get new information. And that leads us perfectly to our 4th and final pillar, the zone of proximal development, or ZPD for short. This is that magical sweet spot for learning. It's the space where a task is just a little bit out of reach on your own, but totally doable with a bit of help. I love this way of putting it. The ZPD is basically the Goldilocks zone of learning. If something's way too hard, you just get overwhelmed and anxious. If it's too easy, you're bored and you don't grow. The real magic, the real progress, happens right there in the middle, where it's not too hard, not too easy, but just right. All right, so we have our foundation, right? Motivation, interlanguage, active construction, and the ZPD. Now, let's get practical. Let's look at the 4 keys that actually unlock the power of these pillars and put all this theory into practice. The first key is something called noticing. We have this idea that we can just sort of absorb things without trying, but real learning requires conscious, focused attention. It's about actively paying attention to the new details and, this is the critical part, spotting the gap between what you're doing and what the correct version looks like. This quote from the linguist Susan Gass really just nails the setup for our second key. It hammers home the point that what we're exposed to, the information we take in, is just absolutely fundamental to the whole process. So, here it is, our second key, understanding the huge difference between input and intake. Input is just all the stuff you see and hear. You could be swimming in it all day long. But intake, that's the tiny, valuable fraction of the input that you actually notice, process, and use to update that internal rulebook we talked about. Only intake becomes actual learning. So think about the journey that information has to take. First, it just hits your senses as raw input. But for it to even make it into your short-term memory, you have to actively notice it. You have to pay attention. And then to really lock it into your long-term memory, you've got to use it, play with it, and connect it to stuff you already know. Otherwise, that input just disappears. Our third key is inferencing. This is basically the skill of being a detective. It's using everything you already know about the world, about the topic, to make smart, educated guesses. It's exactly how you can understand what's going on with a train announcement in a busy station, even if you don't catch every single word. You use the context to fill in the blanks. And our final key is scaffolding. Now, this is a word that gets thrown around a ton, but it means way more than just helping. Real scaffolding is a very precise, very active, and collaborative process of building a temporary support structure that helps the learner do something that's right in their ZPD.
And just look at how strategic this is. This isn't just giving random hints. True scaffolding involves grabbing the learner's interest, making the task simpler, keeping them focused, pointing out the important stuff, and even helping them manage their frustration. It's a real partnership in learning. Okay, let's bring this all home. We've talked about these pillars and keys as separate things, but the real aha moment comes when you see how they're all deeply connected. This is where it all clicks into place. And here it is, probably the most important point of this whole thing. None of these keys work on their own. Every single one of them. Noticing, input, inferencing, scaffolding. They all rely on all four of those pillars. I mean, think about it. Scaffolding is totally useless if a task isn't in the learner's ZPD. Noticing won't happen if there's no motivation. It's all one big interconnected system. So, if we accept that learning is this integrated system, how do we actually use it to get better at something, to move toward mastery? Well, the last piece of the puzzle is really understanding what we mean by challenge. It's not just about how hard something is. This is so key. A task can use really simple language but demand a ton of brain power, or vice versa. The real challenge, the one that leads to growth, is about the level of cognitive effort, the thinking that you're being asked to do. And we can actually measure that. It's often broken down into these 6 levels. You see, real learning isn't about staying at the bottom, just remembering facts. It's about climbing this ladder, moving from just remembering to understanding it, then applying it, analyzing it, evaluating it, and finally, getting all the way to the top where you can create something totally new with that knowledge. That's where the deep learning lives. So, we'll leave you with this thought. We spend so much time focusing on the what and how of learning, the methods and the techniques. But what we've seen today is that the real power comes from understanding the why. Getting these deep principles, from motivation to the ZPD, is the ultimate key. It lets you stop just blindly following methods and start designing your own real path to mastery.